Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. We got a great one for you here, as always. It's officially UAW Strike Day, and Newsflash has full spectrum coverage of everything going on. We're talking about the auto workers on strike today. In all three of the big three automaker plants, starting at just one factory and expanding throughout the Midwest, throughout the heart of the American car industry, holding the bosses accountable and striking for a fair share of their equity and the profit that they make. Also on the show today, Joe Biden is in trouble, and the fine art of naming a group chat. That's going to be a very interesting one, folks. You are going to be... It's going to be a fun one. I'm looking forward to that. But UAW strike going to be absolutely crazy for the next period of time. The energy is high. People, I think, are feeling good based on what I've seen on social media. People out there, they're honking their horns. It's day one of the strike. It's never, this is not something, again, you got to say this every time. I think it's a very, very important thing to say, to clarify, is that this is not something that many people don't want to be doing. Like, they don't want to be on strike. They don't want to have to ask, for their wage. Because going on strike, it's obviously a huge economic risk. Just as much for the employee as the employer. You're losing health insurance. You're losing, a huge chunk of your pay. You're taking away your main source of income. UAW is going to have a better strike fund than most, but it's still not going to be anywhere near, the same to say, working, a normal day even. And that is very, very important there to clarify. So, we have this here in labor notes. At midnight, the clock ran out, and the auto workers massed on the picket line. The first ever simultaneous strike at the big three automakers, General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, started, which is essentially Chrysler, September 15th, with 13,000 workers walking out of the three assembly plants in Michigan, Ohio, and Missouri. There are 146,000 United Auto Workers members at the big three. The UAW is calling the strategy a stand-up strike, a nod to the Flint sit-down strike of 1936-37 that helped establish the union. The shot across the bow came 2 hours shy of midnight via a very short Facebook Live video where UAW President Shawn Fain shared the three strike targets: Stellantis' Toledo Assembly Complex in Ohio, GM's Wentzville Assembly Center in St. Louis, and the final assembly and paint departments at the Ford, Michigan Assembly Plant near West Detroit. These plants make highly profitable full-size SUVs and trucks, including the Jeep Wrangler, Chevy Colorado, and Ford Bronco. Fain laid out the union's escalation strategy on Wednesday. The union will target a few plants first, letting the big three know the union is willing to inflict financial pain. The idea is to keep the companies guessing. If they don't move on the union's demands, the pain will be applied, and more pain will be applied, but the companies won't be able to predict where an all-out strike is a possibility. It is a big, big thing, according to UAW President Shawn Fain. So here is how he sounded on that Facebook Live video earlier as he went through some of the strike targets. Let's take a listen to that.
That deadline is nearly here. Tonight, for the first time in our history, we will strike all three of the big three at once. We are using a new strategy, the stand-up strike. We will call on select facilities, locals, or units to stand up and go on strike. Tonight, we call on 3 units to stand up and go on strike at midnight if we do not reach a tentative agreement in the next 2 hours. We're calling on GM, Wentzville Assembly, Local 2250 in Region 4 to stand up and strike. We're calling on Stellantis, Toledo Assembly Complex, Local 12 in Region 2B to stand up and strike. And we're calling on Ford, Michigan Assembly Plant, Final Assembly and Paint only, Local 900 in Region 1A to stand up and strike. These 3 units are being called to stand up and walk out on strike at midnight tonight. The locals that are not yet called to join the stand-up strike will continue working under an expired agreement. No contract extensions. Though the contract is expired, most of your contract is still in effect. Management cannot change terms and conditions of work in your workplace.
Yeah, so a little bit of a Sean Fain trying to rally up the troops there, trying to call out those units on strike, saying, even though you're under expired contract, management still can't try and mess around with you in either way, shape, or form. Some members who had been expecting an all-out strike right away were a little bit disappointed, but on Thursday, some at the Toledo Assembly wore black in mourning, but as the deadline approached, Regional Director Dave Green was seen in town and people's spirits were buoyed as it became apparent that their plant would be one of the strike sites. So, yeah, it was a pretty incredible thing because people, this is we saw this with the Teamsters, we saw it with Shauna O'Brien, and the huge groundswell of Teamster, just general democracy, getting people involved, and people feeling like they have a role in their union. We've done labor notes articles on this show before where people, they talked about it, so it's like, I've been in the union since 1990, but this was the first time that I really felt involved. I felt like there's going to be a real kind of a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to actually making sense here and actually making, real progress when it comes to a just broader, kind of a broader look at the, the way things stand here, which is really, and just the feeling like you have an ability to actually influence politics, influence, the conditions of your life has been really robbed from people for, just generations, at least on the purely political spectrum. But this kind of workplace democracy, this kind of feeling that if I get involved, if I do something, I can actually really myself, not by even voting for anyone, just by banding together with my colleagues, I can make my life circumstances fundamentally, markedly, tangibly better. So it is pretty cool to see, just because of all this communication, Sean Fain running kind of in a very similar way, a very similar strategy, taking over a very, very corrupt union, making it more democratic, more militant. He has come in and really communicated with the members and really just given them something to believe in. And you can already see how that is, really effective. Normally workers, if you had this conversation 10, 15 years ago, there would have been workers who would have been, disappointed the strike was happening in the first place. The general body of the union being so excited, so desperate even to get out there on the picket line and to strike is so telling and so indicative of the fact that we are in a very different place than we were in the kind of early Obama years, even the entire Obama years. It's been a big surge. So yeah, so it is really, really kind of incredible. So if you ask for the deadline, Chris Falzone, working an evening shift at the Toledo Assembly plant, reported the scene inside. Corporate management is walking the floor along with the first and second shift management in case of a strike. He said, what I'm hearing from paint shop is that they are emptying the paint department in Gladiator and Wrangler side in case of a strike. He was walking at the floor distributing leaflets about what would happen if they continued to operate under an expired contract at midnight. Which is it was pretty kind of interesting, just kind of going to what Sean Fain was saying a little bit before. He's saying, you can still work, but management won't be able to kind of interfere or change the terms of your work because you are under this expired contract. We still kind of got to negotiate it. And the leaflets were, it's like, what happens if a contract what expires upon contract expiration? Arbitration expires, management rights, union security, but not dues checkoff, no strike, no lockout. What does not expire under the contract expiration? What are the mandatory subjects of bargaining, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? How do I help enforce the status quo? So essentially what they're just saying is just make sure that management doesn't try and change anything, even though, most of the UAW members today will still be working, even though they're under an expired contract, not doing an all-out strike right away, which is, pretty, interesting to say the least. If it works, it works, but it'll be definitely an interesting strategy to take a look at. But yeah. Meanwhile, day shift workers at Austin Gore, a 12-year veteran on the assembly line, and strike captain were waiting at home. We're all waiting on pins and needles, Gore said. Normally, I'd be going to bed right now, but I'm staying up late. Workers at Toledo Assembly have been pinning their hopes on being selected to strike because they expect that management will resort to a campaign of terror against the workers who stay on the shop floor. The company puts up a facade like they care about their employees, telling us that we are one big family, said Gore. Meanwhile, they're going to have supervisors walk around dinging us for the tiniest stuff if we are working under an expired contract. We feel like unprotected prey, which could be another interesting thing when it comes to the union and the conduct of you could clearly see kind of a number of different scenarios envision coming out here. If we have, for at least the first period of the strike, most of the workers still working under an expired contract, and how will management treat them? Will that support the strike? Will that bolster the strike because they'll be pissed off at the way management is treating workers under expired contract? Or will they say, hey, what the heck, Sean Fain, we need to step up our game here. You're not leading us in the way that we should be led. It'll be an interesting gamble, I know, but honestly, I feel like I'm favoring Sean Fain more than the company right now, because that just seems to be where the workers are at the moment. Everyone at Michigan Assembly was tuned into Fain's 10 p.m. live stream. Brandon Szczesniak, I guess I'm going to go with that, reported and screamed when they heard their plant name, which is pretty cool. His shift was scheduled to go to 2:30 a.m., but management told everyone to leave at 11 p.m. Szczesniak is 21. He's been working in the plant since he got out of high school. He makes $19.10 an hour. He'd like to have a family, he says, but it takes 8 years. Since it takes 8 years to get top pay, he'd be almost 30. He believes people are angry and that a strike is needed. He says it's like a revolving door. It's not a career anymore. It's a job. They want us to buy Fords, but how can we buy a Ford on this pay? So, very similar to what Henry Ford thought at the time. He's like, I just want to pay my workers enough to be able to even just buy my products. Now like a Ford is like this used to be this all-American car, and now it's even like a luxury item, even for the people that work at their their own plant. Henry Ford was not the nicest guy in a lot of different ways, but he understood that part of the equation for sure. So for those who won't be striking just yet, the union was again quick to inform members of their rights when working under an expired contract. In almost all matters, the companies are required to maintain the status quo. For instance, just cause protections still apply. An exception, though, without a no strike clause in effect, workers may strike at any time, and the companies may also lock them out, which is interesting. So the guidance left many workers questioning how far they could push these rights. At the local 2250 hall, with next to General Manager Wentzville, GM Wentzville, General Manager Wentzville. I feel like General Manager of the Union or something. I don't know. GM. Oh my God. GM Wentzville members lined up with questions for officers yesterday, leading to officers to close the hall to the press. We all plan to go into work tonight. A picket captain on the night shift at Wentzville said, but we were mentally and physically ready to walk off if the call came. Whether or not they struck, locals at some major plants showed they plan to put pressure on management. So yeah, whether or not they struck, though, locals at some major plants showed they plan to put pressure on management. At GM Spring Hill in Tennessee, our shop chairman said that he didn't want anybody to accept overtime after the deadline, said longtime production manager Kenneth LaRue. It's been at least 15 years since local leaders coordinated no overtime. And, I think there's probably going to be a lot of people accepting overtime at that plant. Moves like that could be a serious blow for many big three plants. So this is like this is my apologies. This is coordinated on the union side. The shop chairman, this would be a UAW person saying, we're not going to be able to strike yet. We may be able to strike soon, but don't accept any overtime after the deadline. Don't give these people anything, which could be a pretty big blow for the big three plants, even if they're not striking. And because, of course, just like so many other plants, they've come to try and squeeze people out, trying to rely on extensive overtime as the turnover rate has climbed throughout the years of tiers and falling real wages. After decades of a go-along union that's hollowed out wages and working conditions, the UAW, under a newly elected reform leadership, has put forward bold demands, demanding a 40% page boost in line with what the CEOs have been getting, and to end the tiers. Production workers hired since 2007 are on a permanent lower track where they forgo pensions and retiree health benefits. There are also multiple even lower wage tiers, such as workers in the parts distribution centers and many making components for electric vehicles, which are by and large even still non-union jobs. And that's going to be something the UAW definitely is going to look to get on for sure. I mean, it really is. Just because you were, happen to be hired at a later date, a date later than 2007, you sacrifice healthcare, you sacrifice pension, you sacrifice so much, and that is just because of completely concessionary unionism and just an inability by the UAW leaders to in any way conceptualize the possibility of standing up for just the general rights of their membership. And as the audio industry undergoes seismic shifts in the transition from gas-powered to electric vehicles, workers are demanding job security, the right to strike over plant closures, and a working family protection program where laid-off workers could get paid to do community service, which would be pretty cool, especially when you see so many plant closures, so much turbulence just in general in the auto industry. Workers are also demanding a shorter work week, the restoration of cost of living raises pegged to inflation, the COLA, and the conversion of a lower tier of so-called temp workers who can remain in that category for years into permanent employees after just 90 days. So, yeah, some pretty serious, some pretty bold demands. And if they're able to get, even 75% of them, it'll be a huge victory. So, yeah, and it seems like the pressure's coming out high. They're getting some great politician support out in the Midwest for, whatever that means. Rashid Tlaib, she was on the picket line in Michigan last night, so it was obviously really good to see that. And John Fetterman always out in Pennsylvania. These Rust Belt, especially the Rust Belt Democratic. I'm not seeing any Republican politicians yet, but Rust Belt Democratic politicians are showing up and showing out for auto workers. Ford has proposed to convert all current temps to full-time after 90 days, but not future temps. GM and Stellantis have proposed raising the minimum wage from temps to $2.20 an hour from $16.67 and $15.68 respectively. But Stellantis has not proposed a path to full-time employment for temps at GM. They're currently supposed to be converted after 2 years, but that's not often the reality. So, yeah. They've all offered half the time it takes full-time seniority workers to reach job pay. All the companies have from 8 years to 4, but that's still well shy of the union's proposal, a 90-day progression to top rate, especially for those temporary worker programs. The companies have also proposed increases ranging from 17.5% to 20% over 4 years, but they made no movement on the union's job security proposals. Altogether, we're seeing movement from the companies, Vane said, but they're still not willing to agree to the kind of raises that will make up for inflation on the top of decades of falling wages. So, again, this is what happens. It's 40%. It may seem really drastic, or again, over A, it's over a long period of time, and B, you have to keep in mind that for decades their wages have been falling. They have been increasing. And they have been asked. The UAW workers have literally saved the auto industry time and time again by putting their dignity, by putting their job security and putting their financial security aside. Probably not the best way of doing it though. Probably not willingly. It's because they had relatively poor union representation. But it has been it has been pretty clear that the sacrifice the UAW have played a really big role, especially with the past few years, in terms of their just general economic security, in terms of literally keeping the auto industry alive. Like, it has been that serious, and the UAW, just the auto industry in general, has been, as I'm sure anyone with the ability to read the news, who's been alive for more than 2 seconds has been aware. It's been pretty rough for them. And now essentially what they're saying is it is finally time for the UAW to pay what they owe. The union's escalating strategy in this round of negotiations is a departure from 2019 when 46,000 workers struck GM for 40 days. The company's bottom line took a $3.6 billion hit, but workers felt little was gained. The leaders of the union at the time are ready to settle cheap. This time, union leadership looks much different and has set its sights higher. Fain and the other reformers won office on promises of greater transparency and militancy in the union's first ever direct election for top posts. Fain ran as part of the Members United slate, backed by the reform movement Unite All Workers for Democracy, taking office in March. Since negotiators began in July, newly elected reform leaders of UAW have thrown the automakers off balance with an aggressive and very public approach to negotiations, symbolized by Fain's refusal to engage in the traditional handshake ceremony with company leaders to kick off bargaining. Instead, he went out to meet members at the plant gates. So, yeah, it's really clear. Been different, and it's been a member focus, not just a pal around with the bosses, have a few cigars, and we'll sort something out. No, it's been a member focused strategy. everything Sean Fain does. Go to members, how you can get involved. Here's how you can take a more active role in your union. And here is why this fight actually matters. And it's going to be worth your while to take part in it. And people, you can tell, are really, really responding to it. So, yeah, so it's been really kind of interesting to see this traditional handshake ceremony go, psych, out to the plant gates. And that stuff like that kind of, it's just not just that one thing or any other thing. It is a consistent mindset of saying we need these people to be involved and engaged. So, yeah, so it was a pretty big deal. So he said, I'll tell you this, I'm at peace with the decision to strike if we have to, because I know that we're on the right side of this battle. I'm telling more than 30,000 viewers on Facebook Live on Wednesday. It's a battle of the working class against the rich, the haves versus the have-nots, the billionaire class against everybody else. He's talking about the sports analogies, scripture verses, and precepts from the traditions of class struggle unionism. For the last 40 years, the billionaire class has been taking everything and leaving everybody else to fight for the scraps. Fain said, we are not the problem. Corporate greed is the problem. The union held a Friday afternoon rally in Detroit with Senator Bernie Sanders. The UAW members fighting not only for themselves, but against a corporate culture of arrogance, cruelty, selfishness, causing massive and unnecessary pain for the majority of working families throughout this country. Senator Sanders wrote in the Guardian op-ed this week. Striking workers will get $500 per week strike pay, raised last year from $275, paid from for the union's $825 million strike fund. Cha-ching. Union has also said it will pay strikers' health insurance premiums. Teamster car haulers, though, who are delivering vehicles from the Big Three, have vowed to refuse to deliver to dealerships during the strike. We are 100% supportive of the UAW workers and Sean Fain's position, said Kevin Moore, president of Teamsters Local 299 in Detroit, telling the Detroit Free Press, our Teamsters will not cross picket lines. All right, so yeah, that is how the Teamsters do it. That's how the UAW does it. Some great solidarity, way to stick together for them. Before we move on, though, here's how to find a picket near you. So when Frito-Lay workers went on strike 2 summers ago in Topeka, Kansas, the bakery workers were amazed at the support they received, including from UAW members who brought with them water and donuts. It was unbelievable how many unions showed up to support us, said striker Chantel Mendenhall. A lot of us now have an idea of how it could be if unions stuck together like that. So if you're in a union, if you're near a picket line and you're sympathetic to the strike, here is how you can do. Here's how you can actually, go support some striking workers. Is find a UAW Big Three workplace near you. You got a map that is available. I think it's the Big Three work sites. Essentially, is where it is, and they all have essentially a big strike planned, or sometime kind of in the near future. Mostly, though, if you're in the Midwest, if you're in Michigan, there's some around Chicago, there's some around St. Louis, there's one around St. Louis that's on strike today. So you kind of find those places, maybe go out, support them if you can. You can organize a crew from your workplace. Instead of showing alone to a picket line, you can bring your coworkers out too. Talk to coworkers on breaks that are already a union meeting about why this strike matters to you, perhaps as a fight that could set standards against tiers and force overtime, or as an inspiring model if your own local needs to strike. You can reach out to strikers beforehand and go and help. You can get to know the strikers, meet new people, bring some food. You can fly, do something called flying squadrons. If you're in an area with multiple picket lines, you can get a crew to get together to roll through a few. That's a tradition that UAW strikers will love to see turned back their way, something that they have done for other unions in the past. If you're far from a picket, you can pressure the profiteers. BlackRock, Capital Group, and Vanguard are finance giants who are the top shareholders across the Big Three, and they have offices that may be closer to you than a plant. GM, Ford, and Stellantis have authorized $5 billion in stock buybacks in the last year. At the same time, they've been throwing cash at investors. Major Big Three plants, they have claimed they're an emergency to force auto workers into 60-hour weeks to keep their jobs. As a last resort, you can call. In-person pickets and rallies will build relationships and pressure the boss. But most on top of that, you can, other strike supporters can also leave a stern phone message for the Big Three CEOs by calling 300-1249. Thanks to a solidarity effort from environmental nonprofits, including Labor Network for Sustainability and Greenpeace. Let those executive goons know why you and your union coworkers stand with the UAW. So there you go. From Keith Bauer-Brown there. Also in labor notes. So big UAW strike period coming up. As you can imagine, we'll be following it closely right here on Newsflash. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening and supporting Newsflash. We now have a brand new way for you to be heard if you want, whether a text message or a audio message. Please, no video messages. I really just do not think that's necessary. We have a new feedback box open for you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is officially open. SWRN702@gmail.com. Send a text message, send a voice message of no more than 30 seconds via the voice memos function. Either of those two options, and we will 100%, not going to find this guarantee anywhere else. We're going to play it on the show, listen to what you have to say, and it literally could be about anything. Well, if it's inappropriate, we won't play it, but it could be about anything. Thank you so much. This is my thank you to all the listeners who have stuck out with us and want to have their own voice in the show. SWRN702@gmail.com is the address. President Joe Biden in a little bit of trouble as of late. His son Hunter is causing most of that for him. In just over 48 hours this week, President Biden faced a double-barreled onslaught of political and personal setbacks as his son's business dealings and personal struggles created new turbulence at a time when his advisors wanted to focus attention on the problems of former President Donald Trump and House Republicans. So on Thursday, Biden's son was indicted on charges of making false statements and illegally possessing a handgun, paving the way for a criminal trial that could unfold as Biden pursues re-election. I think there was a big part, the mainstream media here really, not doing too well. I broadly consume, left-wing and mainstream media, so it's like, the as you can imagine, the coverage I'm getting on the Hunter Biden story, is not the same as right wing that's covering every single detail of it. But again, you can't really trust the right wing coverage of it either because it's coming from another place. From the best I can tell, a big part of what he did was just use his influence to try and get people to think that he was really really tight with his dad and he could make things happen because his dad was a powerful guy and he could get his dad to get things to happen for the people that he was in contact with. That's how we got appointments to natural gas boards and things like that. So Burisma and all. I'm sure anyone who's followed politics for at least a certain amount of time has probably heard the name Burisma before, but it seems like nothing with regards to, and he also this was all for his crack binge and all that stuff. But it was a whole crazy situation. So that came all the while it came 2 days after House Republicans opened the formal impeachment inquiry on whether the president benefited from the son's business dealings, although they have produced no direct evidence to that effect. Neither the inquiry or the indictment was unexpected, but the back-to-back developments underscore the challenges Biden faced as he runs for a second term. He faces no real serious competition with the Democratic nomination, but some Democrats are going increasingly concerned about his vulnerabilities. This is just some kind of mainstream media framing for the guy who's probably the most unpopular nominee to run again since Jimmy Carter, including his age, as polls show a tight race between him and Trump, the frontrunner for the nomination. The legal and political clouds hanging over Hunter Biden now add to those troubles. It's always a concern, said former Senator Doug Jones of Alabama, who the Washington Post calls a Biden ally, which is interesting, of Hunter Biden's indictment. It's weighing on him and his entire family. The fact of the matter is the president has made a point of letting the Justice Department do its work and not interfere. The chips are going to fall where they're going to fall. Trump's criminal trials stemming from his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results and his alleged mishandling of classified documents have largely overshadowed Biden's challenges to this point. But an impeachment inquiry and indictment of an immediate family member, especially in such rapid succession, represent a striking pair of setbacks for the president, a reality that may become more evident with the formal launch of the proceedings in the courtroom and the Capitol. Jones says he thinks the court case will end up with a favorable resolution for Hunter Biden. In the meantime, he predicted the president will stay focused on selling his record to the voters. So again, the president will continue to be awesome. No, it's like Hunter Biden probably did most, plus the crack and all that stuff, but he probably did pretty much what most political sons and daughters try and do, using their father or mother's, big name for influence. And that is kind of part and parcel of just being in Washington politics, just the baseline level of corruption, which Hunter Biden, I honestly, again, of course, you got that crack factor in there that makes everything a little bit more interesting, but he genuinely, I would say, did not do anything that really breached the, because of course you got, things that should be illegal but aren't, and then things that are actually legal. He kind of hovers right around that border of things that are legal but shouldn't be, are legal but shouldn't be, and that bordering with actual illegality. He is, kind of right around that border, but definitely not cross the line into actual illegality, of course, aside from, possessing the gun and, of course, the crack. But the big question is, how will this play politically? And I think it's kind of, obviously, it is kind of too early to tell because it's still, as the Brits say, early days yet until the election. We're still like, 18 months away or so? I don't know. That's just that's the full campaign season. But it could be very interesting because if as we remember, Hillary Clinton, right after the ground by the P word tape, that debate, the second debate happened, Trump makes the whole issue out of Bill Clinton's conduct from, that Hillary, covered up, worked with, and, essentially endorsed through her complicity is the way I would describe it. With Bill's really atrocious, horrific sexual misconduct over the years. So that is something that really kind of served to nullify for him. And of course, you get the Clinton Foundation those both respectively served to nullify the sexual misconduct and the corruption that everyone kind of associated Trump with. If you can get voters to look at Biden and look at what he did and say, oh, he's a politician, he's just doing whatever he did. Trump may be a crook. They're getting all of the indictments after him, but that's because he actually threatens the establishment. He is someone who's going to stand up and fight for us. That's why they're coming in after him for doing stuff that isn't really that bad. But Biden, who is hopelessly corrupt, they're treating incredibly lightly because they just want to, they want to protect their guy, but really Trump's gonna stand up. He's just, he did a little bit of stuff wrong, but Biden did worse, or not even Biden did worse, but Biden did the same thing, or they all do it. That's going to be a pretty easy case for the Trump campaign to make. But the question is, will that land? That that very well could be the decider of the election. All right, we have our last story here today. It's a pretty good one. The first thing R.J. McLaughlin did when he was back on campus late August for his junior year at Ramapo College in New Jersey was make a group chat for himself and the three guys with whom he shares a dormitory apartment. They had to come up with the perfect name. The main thing is finding something that makes everybody happy and everybody laugh. It has to be something that expresses who we are. It's a really kind of a funny little article just about naming group chats here in the New York Times. Really, it touches on probably one of the biggest, the true sciences of our time, which is essentially just naming the group chats. I've been in the situation before, getting new group together. Everyone's excited, just like, oh, let's go, we're all together, whatever. And then what do you call the group chat? And honestly, I consider myself to be, a relatively funny person, but when it comes to, thinking like that on the fly, I really just do not do well. Like I was like the group, the house, like I didn't have this name, but I'm in the same kind of situation. Like, and our group chat is called Roomies. Like, and it's just, it's not really that impressive. Like I've seen a lot better ones. McLaughlin is part of so many group chats that each one has to have a name. There's a family chat, the multiple friend chats, there's the group chat, TM, which is incredibly basic. Anything with a trademark is just basic. The 4.5 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, the Clash chats, which is Clash, short for Clash of Clans, a game played during critical reading and writing, which is funny. I was like, but also you should not still be playing Clash of Clans of college. I played that in like 5th grade. I would never have a group chat with no name and just numbers. How would you differentiate them? Leaving it blank would be like not naming a baby, he said, which is a pretty good point. You gotta have some kind of group chat. It gives a group kind of cohesion. Like the only time where you don't name your group chats is like when it's some group project in class where no one knows each other and they're just kind of doing it and not trying to be friends, essentially, just trying to get it done. So over time, he's developed a playbook for coming up with one. I lead a brainstorming session where everyone puts ideas out into the chat. Then we all vote on it. He said the exercise to be repeated is to determine what the group's picture will be. He estimated that he has come up with 24 or more chat group names. McLaughlin knows that in other groups, people would change their name arbitrarily, but that doesn't fly when he's in charge. When you redo a group chat name, it has to be a democratic decision between everybody. The name has value, and we have to protect it. For the dorm room chat, they settled on Carjack, an anagram of their names, Anthony, John, Curtis, and RJ. The picture is also a picture of a carjack, which honestly, I'm sorry. This is a pretty stupid, like, you're doing an anagram of each other. It's like, it's got to be some sort of, I think the best group chat names are some sort of like inside joke, that really, really the only people who get it are the people in the chat. Like, those are some of the best ones in my opinion. Like, there's one here that they have, like, this guy sent him in. His name is RJ McLaughlin. He sent in a picture. It was like his pinned group chats on top of his page. And then there's this one. This is a back pocket with a copyright, which I think is, that one seems a little. I'm like, what's this one? If I'm a habitually, nosy person. Like, I have to admit it. Like, I'm a nosy person. Like, if I'm on the subway, I may, be looking over and saying, oh, what's this person texting about? It's a little interesting. But so if you know me in real life, maybe, buy a privacy. No. I'm not bad, I promise. But either way, like you gotta have some name with some sort of mystery to it. You gotta have it's not just like the guys, the bros, or like, Carjack. I would be like, what's Carjack? But then I feel like I'd be incredibly disappointed when I find out what the name is, and all of a sudden it is it's just an anagram of the names. Like, come on, that's pretty ridiculous. But the real question I have with this is this article was in the New York Times. I don't get how that's possible. But anyway, that's all the time we got for you guys today. We will be back on Monday. It's Newsflash.